Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. The leaves are a-changing. The air is a little cooler in these parts. The sweatshirts and jackets have been dusted off, but the intensity and passion remains the same when it comes to listening to yours truly as I uncover all that's happening in sports, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And as those leaves are changing, and as it's getting a little chilly out there, and the days are getting shorter, to think 2 weeks from this coming Saturday, we're going to have to turn the clocks back. And then 6 weeks from today is Thanksgiving. Are we serious here? You're already starting to see the commercials on TV, and we're not even getting into it. Let's stay in the moment. Let's not look so far ahead. But we want to look to what's happening now and what's happening in the playoffs when it comes to Major League Baseball. It looks like the Toronto Blue Jays have finally woken up. It's almost as if somebody poked them on the side to say, hey, the ALCS began 2 games ago, and it's already game 3. So if you don't snap out of it, you guys look like you may get swept out of Seattle and be sleepless in the process, or you could get yourselves back into the series, which they did do so last night. And that was huge for baseball on so many levels because of what has transpired in the National League, which we could be getting a sweep in LA, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But for Toronto, even after the first inning where Julio Rodriguez was at a big series to date, hit a 2-run bomb, and you know that crowd is just on edge. They're ready to celebrate. They're ready to taste the champagne yet again, to get to their first ever World Series, and to have that city host a Mariner team that has been in a magic carpet ride pretty much since the early part of September. And for Rodriguez to get themselves off the deck, and it looked like it was going to be another big-time win where the Blue Jays were going to be looking around wondering what the hell hit us, what has happened. The Yankee series, we were dominant, and now all of a sudden the bats have taken an early vacation. Well, then in the top of the third, that's where everything shifted, where Andres Gimenez hit the 2-run homer and a 5-run uprising there. And from that point on, that's when the Blue Jays took over. They had 5 home runs in the game. They scored in 4 consecutive innings. They actually scored 12 unanswered runs after that 2-0 hole that they put themselves in. And they cruised and coasted to a 13-4 win, which makes you think, will the momentum carry over into tonight's game where they'll have a pivotal game 4? And one thing's for sure, I would think that Toronto's going to want to get this game. They don't want to look far ahead. And I understand that even if they don't get this game, they will have to play for their lives there tomorrow in order to get back to Toronto. But I would think that the desperation should really be on high alert for them because they would want to get this game. Not to say that game 5 would be house money for them because they know if they lose, they'd have to go back to Toronto down 3-2 and have to win both games in order to get to a World Series. But I would think just to put the pressure on the Mariners, because if the Mariners win tonight, you're going to look at a situation where they're going to be ready to celebrate and not want to get on a plane to go back east to Toronto, that even if they do lose and the series gets extended to 6 games, still all the pressure is going to be on Toronto until you get to game 7. Whereas if you win tonight, you'll have an opportunity tomorrow to see if you could steal a game to come back from an 0-2 deficit, having to go on the road. And I would think in order for the series to really have juice, they need to win tonight. I understand that if it's 3-1 and Toronto wins, it goes back to Toronto, but you would think that Seattle just needing one of the next 2 games in Toronto, if that were to be the case, considering that they already won the first 2 games there, there's not going to be any drama. There's not going to be any intensity as far as the pressure ratcheting it up in a case where when you get to a game number 6, even if it's a situation where the Blue Jays win tonight, that game tomorrow would be pivotal to no end. Because even if Toronto does win that game and happen to win all 3 games in the middle part of this playoff series, nobody's going to discount what Seattle did in the first 2 games where they could come back and win. And we just saw 2 years ago in an ALCS where the Houston Astros, who had the home field advantage and lost the first 2 games in their building, they went to Texas to play the Rangers, won the next 3, and game 5 in dramatic fashion when they were down 4-2 in the 9th inning, and Jose Altuve hit that 3-run homer to propel them to win a game 5 and go up 3-2 in a series. And then what happened? They lost the next 2 games at home. So just because if Toronto does happen to win tonight and really puts the pressure on Seattle to win tomorrow night, to come back home and think that they have the upper hand to win this series, and technically they will, considering they need one game of the next two if it were to play out that way. But I don't think Seattle's going to go to Toronto, whether they are up 3-2 or down 3-2, thinking that, oh, there's no way that we're going to be able to win in that building, knowing that they already have. And in close fashion in game one, or in a blowout fashion as you saw there in game two. So to me, this series is far from over, but one more time, if there's going to be any suspense, especially if it gets to a fifth game tied, it has to be that way. It can't be anything less than that. Because 3-1, I don't want to hear it. Everybody's going to think that Toronto is going to be out to sea, that there's no way Seattle's going to win, and then watch Toronto win, that even though you'll have a scenario where they're going to go back to Toronto, but then Seattle, with their success there north of the border, why would you think that all of a sudden they're just going to go right in the tank, knowing that they're 27 outs away from winning a World Series, or getting to a World Series, not winning it. They have to get there first before they can win it, right, JAYREELZ? So that's how I'm looking at how this is going to unfold. And like I mentioned earlier, for baseball, they needed this in the worst way. They could not have a 3-0 series lead going into Game 4 tonight, knowing that the Dodgers could be on the cusp of their own sweep. But now that you have a bit of a series, it will really be that much more interesting if the Blue Jays can find a way to win this one later this evening. And as you know about the schedule, you have the Blue Jays and the Mariners are going to play tonight and then tomorrow afternoon before the scene shifting quite possibly to Toronto. Right now, we don't know, because if the Mariners take care of business these next two games, the series is over. So we cannot all of a sudden put the cart before the horse to think that there's going to automatically be a game 6 when we've only had 3 games in and the series could close out before we even get to the weekend. So with that, and as I look at the schedule real quick, you'll have that game tomorrow afternoon, game 5, which I actually like. It'll precede the Milwaukee and LA Dodger game there tomorrow night. And let me just peek at the times here just to make sure. I know today you have 6:08 and 9:33, and tomorrow it's different. It's 6:08 and 8:38. And then the Dodgers and Brewers, if there is a game 5, will be a standalone game on Saturday, where if there is a game 6, it'll be Sunday in Toronto. And then, of course, the National League will have a day off if Milwaukee somehow, some way wins 2 of the next 3 at minimum in order to bring it back to Milwaukee. And then if that's the case, game number 6 will be on Monday. So that's what you have there in the American League. And I'm sure Rob Manfred, they're going to want to have that extended, maybe get that at least to a 6th game to know that you'll have a game there on Sunday night, because the last thing they want is for the series to end tomorrow, knowing that the World Series scheduled to start a week from tomorrow, that they don't want to have a 5-6 day layoff. They want to try to get to the ALCS, to the World Series as seamless and hopefully without that big break in between as possible. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I know once we get to Monday's podcast, pretty much maybe everything will be etched in stone and set and ready to go, or we may quite possibly have a game 6 that we could discuss and get into, or maybe even a game 7 for that matter, because if game 6 Sunday night is between Seattle and Toronto, and it just so happens to be whomever needs to win that game in order to push it to a game 7, we could talk about that on Monday's podcast, which would be enormous for baseball, because so far they've actually had a pretty good playoff. I mean, think about it. In the wild card round, out of the 4 series, 3 went to a game 3. And then what we saw there in the division series, I understand that Toronto took care of the Yankees in 4. And then you had the Dodgers and Phillies, which was a fascinating series, although it ended in 4, and it would have been great if it ended in 5. You also had the Seattle and Detroit, which ended in a classic game 5, as we talked about there on Monday's podcast. And then the other series of note, did I cover it all? Yeah, Yankees, Dodgers. Oh, and then the Brewers and Cubs went 5 games as well. And I understand maybe not as sexy and as thrilling as it would have been if it was Yankees, Blue Jays, or even Dodgers, Phillies, but you have had a bunch of decisive games, whether it's 3 or 5, and 5 of them so far this postseason. So the hope is that baseball could get to at least a 6th game in both of these series, or at least 1, because anything short of that would certainly be disappointing. And as far as the other series with the Brewers and the Dodgers, now 2 games to cover here, where the Dodgers, if you take a look at the 30,000-foot view, I mean, what more can you say about them? They're just too good. And they've pitched unlike we've seen in quite some time. You'd have to go back to the 2005 Chicago White Sox and what they did in the American League Championship Series against the Anaheim Angels, where they had so many pitchers pitch complete games there, whether your name was Jose Contreras or I believe even El Duque was on the team. I think he may have had a start there, maybe game 4. And they had a bunch of pitchers that were phenomenal throughout that stretch in order for them to get to a World Series. And as we all know, the White Sox won that year, which to think, that's actually 20 years ago right about this time. But for the Dodgers and what we've seen here in these first 2 games, for Blake Snell to go out there, 8 innings, 1 hit ball, no strikeouts, or excuse me, no walks and 10 strikeouts, and for him to not pitch the 9th, that you can understand. He was at 103 pitches. Could he have gone out there in the 9th inning with a 2-0 lead? Absolutely. But with Roki Sasaki pretty much being lights out here in this postseason, to me, that was a no-brainer. I could see it was a situation where if you wanted to start Snell and get him in trouble, but you certainly wanted Sasaki to come in a clean inning, not in a dirty inning if possible. But Snell was masterful. The Brewers couldn't do anything against his slider. They were untouchable. They couldn't even do anything with what Snell had to offer that night. And even though Sasaki made it interesting in that 9th inning, and then they actually scratched out a run on a sac fly, but then you had a scenario where Bryce Terang was at the plate with the bases loaded after a great at-bat by Wilson Contreras to load the bases. You had a situation where Sasaki was pulled. They bring in Blake Trinan, and I understand Trinan, you almost have to hold your breath and cross your fingers if you're a Dodger fan. But for Terang, I believe it was on a 2-2 pitch to jackknife his way out of an instance where it looked like the ball could have hit him. And if that was the case, if he leaned into it, that run would have scored, it would have tied the game, and who knows what the complexion of the game would have turned out to be. But as it was, and that's instinct. You're going to try to get out of the way of a pitch, no matter how close it may be to your body, whether it's to your kneecaps, whether it's to your waist, or even at your head for that moment. But your head, you know you're going to try to get out without fail. But as far as Terang goes, he did not get out of the way out of that pitch. Next thing you know, he's swinging at a ball over his head. Strike 3, the game is over, and the Dodgers go on to prevail and win. And then in game number 2, you had Yoshinobu Yamamoto, after giving up a first pitch leadoff homer to Jackson Chourio, pretty much locked down the Brewer offense the rest of the way. He gave up 2 hits, and when you think about it, 5 hits total in the first 2 games by the Brewers, 17 innings pitched by these starters, where they've only given up 1 run and 4 hits. And in the process, how many did Yamamoto strike out the other night? I think he maybe had 8 or 9. Let me get the exact count on that. But the Dodgers, who had in game 1 Freddie Freeman with the home run, but then in game number 2, after Chourio hit the home run, you had Teoscar contribute. You had Max Muncy with a big home run there at 2-1 to extend the game. Kike Hernandez always in the middle of these rallies. Shohei Ohtani, since game 1 of the wild card series, has absolutely done squat. And understand, not many people are getting on his case because the Dodgers are winning. And he hasn't been up in big spots where he's either grounded out into double plays or struck out. And despite the fact that he has been atrocious at the plate, but again, it goes unnoticed because the Dodgers keep winning. And it'll be interesting to see if the Dodgers face any adversity, which I'll get to in a second. But you have a scenario where, and Yamamoto struck out 7 that night. So with the Dodger pitching being nearly unhittable and timely hitting, which you always need in October, by a team that won the World Series last year, that has a lot of lunch pail, despite the 3 Hall of Famers in Ohtani, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman, but they have a lot of lunch pail, gutsy, winning players. And to me, when you really break down what we've seen here, the Dodger bottom of the lineup in comparison to the Brewer Dodger, or the Brewer bottom of the lineup, there's no comparison. And yes, we could talk about how the Dodgers know how to win, and we could talk about how they've been there before and they know what it takes and the championship DNA. Absolutely 1,000%. But when the Brewers are putting up guys like Bryce Terang, who was the 5th hitter, I believe, that night on Monday, Joey Ortiz, the shortstop, the 3rd baseman, Caleb Durbin, and Sal Frelick, the center fielder, those are nice players. They're good players, solid lunch pail type players. But those guys, you can't compare to the Tommy Edmonds who won an NLCS MVP last year. You can't compare to Kike Hernandez. As I mentioned, he's always in the middle of these rallies. He could bat 205 in the regular season, but in October, the guy bats 350. And that's just how he performs. When the lights are bright And that guy's a winning player. He could play on my team. David Stearns, can you pick up the phone when the season is over? Maybe bring him on to add that experience, to add that bat, and you can play him everywhere. Shortstop, third, center, etc. And the Mets need a center fielder. Not that he's a center fielder by trade, but you get where I'm coming from. Will Smith, a guy who's batted cleanup in this lineup, but he's batting ninth, and he always seems to come up big in huge spots. Max Muncy, who always gets on base, hits the home run. I mean, the team is just... it's not reliant on their three big stars, where when you look at Milwaukee, if it's not Jackson Chourio, if it's not Christian Yelich, if it's not even William Contreras, it's a situation where those other guys can't carry those aforementioned players' weight, where if Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman happen to go 1 for 12 in a game, those other guys could go for any combination you want, 6 for 12, 8 for 18, and they pick up the pieces. And that's why, to me, the Brewers, if they have any shot to get back in the series, they got to win today. I mean, and that's not going out on a limb by any means, but you're now up against it if you're a Brewer team with all the success you had this regular season. You swept the Dodgers 6-0, as you recall, back in middle to late June into right past the All-Star break. And now that might as well have been 10 years ago, because we all know what happened in the regular season doesn't matter to what's happening right now in October. So if you're the Brewers, all you can do your best is to try to jump on today's starter and make sure that you get yourself a decent lead, and that's against Tyler Glasnow, who, as we all know, talented, certainly pitched well against the Phillies in Game 4, and definitely has ability to lock down any offense. But if the Brewers, who are pitching a bullpen game, and here's the other difference too when you think about it, Freddie Peralta, who is their ace, and you had to open up with an opener in Game 1 with Aaron Ashby. Today is undecided, and tomorrow is also undecided, where the Dodgers are going to pitch Tyler Glasnow and Shohei Ohtani. I mean, what is happening here? And this Brewer team won, 96 games? And the best record in the sport. But this is, just like I've said, going back to when they were in the midst of that 14-game winning streak and they were pulling away from the NL Central and they had the best record in the sport, how I needed to see this in October. And guess what? They have proven me right to this point. They're not going to win this series, and I don't even think they're going to get out of LA alive. In fact, the chances of them being swept, I think, would be higher than them winning 2 of the next 3 to bring it back to Milwaukee. Now watch, stranger things have happened, you never know. But I would think the Dodgers, right now, they're not even cooking with gas. They have a flamethrower. They have a bunch of propane tanks. I mean, they are just locked and loaded, which is going to lead to the next question. Is this playoff, NLCS, and in essence, the World Series, is it a formality that the Dodgers are going to win back-to-back for the first time since the 98, 99, 2000 Yankees? Tell me otherwise. Unless you're going to get some major injuries to the starting pitching, unless you're going to get Freddie Freeman. Remember last year, he had the ailment there, I believe, with the ankle, and if that's going to crop up, or Mookie Betts, whatever injury that's going to happen with him, not that I'm wishing that by any means, but there is no way that the Dodgers team's going to lose. I mean, they would have to lose their whole rotation similar to last year, and think about this. When they won the World Series last year, they relied on Jack Flaherty, Yamamoto, Walker Buehler, who's coming off an ACL, or an UCL, excuse me, ACL's the knee, UCL's the elbow. And they had to piecemeal it with bullpen games from the start of the playoffs all the way through to the World Series. So now they have Snell, they have Yamamoto, they have Glasnow, they have Ohtani. I mean, they have an embarrassment of riches. And you can't kill the Dodgers because they're doing it by the rules. They're not playing unfair. Other teams can do the same thing. But the Dodgers, I mean, what more can you say? You might as well hand them the trophy now. Why even watch the rest of the series? Why even watch the World Series for that matter? I kid, of course, but this team is a juggernaut. They have finally waited for October to arrive. We talked about this when they were going through their bad stretches where the Padres were neck and neck and the Padres were flat-footed even when they had that series out in San Diego and the Dodgers, in LA, and LA took care of them. And from that point on, they pretty much had the NL West on lock. And they were just trying to get to October. They were just trying to get to the playoffs. And guess what? Very rare that any team, no matter how good, no matter how dominant, no matter how much of a defending champ you could be, it's not easy to just flick the switch and think that, oh, we're in October, now we're awake, now we're ready to go, we're going to steamroll through everybody. There are going to be lulls, there are going to be valleys, and of course there will be peaks considering the talent and the ability of this Dodger team. But right now, there are no valleys. All I see are peaks. And right now, it's looking like the Dodgers are going to cruise to another World Series, and whomever it is that they match up, they're going to be a heavy favorite to win. So that's all I got to say about the Dodgers. I mean, there isn't anything else to add. And as far as the Brewers, I hate to be, I told you so, and I understand that the series is far from over, and we could talk about how anything could change, bounce of a ball, a break, whatever it may be, but the Brewers would show me something if they win 2 of the next 3. And even if they lose in 6, which I still think would fall short considering the success that they had in the regular season, as I've said several times, and I still would look at them if they don't get back to Milwaukee. I mean, anything short of that would be a disaster, of course. But let's say they get to Milwaukee to a game 6 and they lose 6-2. That would still be a big letdown. I don't care what kind of Brewer fan you are. You could clap your hands and say, hey, we got to the ALCS, considering we lost in heartbreaking fashion in the wild card last year and so on and so forth. But you had the best record. And I understand as the defending champs. And you actually could have put the proverbial foot on the Dodgers' necks there on Monday night when you had bases loaded and a scenario where you could have gotten the tying and winning run there and you would have stole that game for the Dodgers and put some doubt in their minds. But you didn't. And that's why the teams who win, they find a way, and the teams that haven't been there, therefore, are 0-2 and trying to find whatever it takes to just win a game and stay alive in this NLCS. So that's what you got. I will recap it all on Monday to see where we're at. Listen, I would think that Toronto will win another game. I think we'll go back to Toronto 3-2. Dodgers, maybe the Brewers win a game. And even if the Dodgers lose, or excuse me, if they win today, I could see the Brewers showing some pride in winning a game 4, but then you might as well just break out the champagne and have the coronation game 5 Dodger Stadium, because I'd be shocked if they happen to get on a plane and go back to Milwaukee to play game 6. All right, now let me shift my attention, put on the helmet and shoulder pads to get into the football, both pros and college. And if you watch my Wednesday live streams, 12 p.m. on YouTube, and if you are just finding out about it, or wait a minute, JAYREELZ has a live stream? Yes, I do. On YouTube, at JAYREELZ. Definitely check it out every Wednesday. I also do a podcast pregame, which was actually pretty interesting this morning because I was talking a lot about not taking yourself seriously in life and various destinations on the planet and a lot of different topics other than sports. But of course, I did touch on a few things. But yesterday, one of the subjects that I brought up, and this is a bigger question which I'll get to, but I figured I'd throw it out now just to kind of lean into it, is the NFL as of right this very moment, going into Week 7 tonight in Cincinnati, where the Pittsburgh Steelers will visit in an AFC North tilt, where you have to admit, this is wide open. This isn't a situation where people wanted to bring up 3-4 weeks ago how, the best 4 teams in football by far are the Buffalo Bills, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Green Bay Packers, and what's the other team I'm missing? Not even the Ravens, and it wasn't even the Chiefs at the time. But there were 4 or 5 teams where a lot of people, maybe the Detroit Lions, a lot of people thought, well, these are the top 4 teams in football. And right away, it was a thing where they wanted to all of a sudden crown these teams as if they've done something. And listen, all due respect to the Eagles, defending champs, etc., but it was way too early to even tell. But now 3 weeks later, and I didn't jump on that narrative, but the one narrative I'm going to get to right now, and it's twofold, it is wide open. Because when you look at the records in each of the conferences, and mind you, that could change in 2 weeks, let alone a month. But when you see the Indianapolis Colts and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, now, there was quite a bit expected from the Buccaneers, knowing that they played at the time in a not-so-good division where, think about it, you have 3 teams that are above 500 in the NFC South. And then you look at the AFC where you have the Colts and then the Texans, excuse me, not the Texans, and the Jaguars. Texans are trying to get back there, but the 2 teams there at the top of the AFC South are 5-1 and 4-2. And you don't see Buffalo up there. You don't see Philadelphia up there. Now, yes, in the standings, but they're not in that proverbial 1 seed where if the season ended today, they would host their respective conferences throughout the rest of the playoff. And I get it. It's way too early to even get into that. But I say it's wide open because you could give me a million combinations of who could be in the Super Bowl right now, and you know what? It would be plausible. Which now leads to tonight's game and the road team that's visiting in the Pittsburgh Steelers, which happens to be my team, of course. But you need breaks along the way. When you're a team that has revamped your roster, especially over the last 2 years, and you know that you have an aging defense, and you have a young offensive side of the ball with players like Jalen Warren and Pat Freiermuth, and an offensive line that's being rebuilt through the draft, as well as Calvin Austin III, I get it. But you have a situation where you have an older team and you have a roster that is built to win right now. And going into the year as a Steeler fan, I thought that, hey, maybe their ceiling would be 12-5. Their floor would probably be 10-7. 12-5 could win a division, maybe get you a 3 seed at best. And then if you're 10-7, you're going to be 6 or 7, and you have to go on the road, and you're going to be in a situation as you've been the last few years where you had to go to Kansas City or you had to go to Baltimore, and that's the last thing you wanted to do. Where now things are actually breaking right for you to the point where they play the Bengals tonight. Bengals are 2-4, Steelers are 4-1, and of course, because they already had their bye, and the Bengals not having their bye yet, when the dust settles, you would think that even if the Steelers happen to win tonight, they'll put themselves in a commanding position to win that division. Because if they go 5-1 and the Bengals are 2-5, they'll have a 4-game lead in the loss column, as they already have a 4-game lead in the loss column over the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens, if Lamar Jackson, they have a bye this week, so maybe if he gets healthy and he comes back the following week when they play the Chicago Bears, and you never know, they could go on a run. I get it, their defense is atrocious. But as I mentioned, this is where the breaks that you need in order for you to get yourself to a position where in January, if you happen to be a top 2 or top 3 seed, maybe, just maybe, there's a run in them to get to not only winning their first playoff game in almost a decade, but to a divisional playoff, to an AFC Championship game, which they have not seen since 2016, which happens to be the year when they last won a playoff game in Kansas City, if you recall. And then on top of all that, dare I say, a Super Bowl? Now listen, I'm not trying to say that the Steelers are going to a Super Bowl or they're going to an AFC Championship game, but as I mentioned, now, of course, you're going to say, JAYREELZ, you're off your rocker. There's still 12 weeks to go in this season, and the Steelers already had their bye. And 1,000%, no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. But as long as they stay healthy, especially if they keep Rodgers upright, and with a win tonight, they will have complete control of that AFC North. I understand, remember last year when they were 10-3 and the Ravens were 8-5 and they had that 2-game lead, including a win in their back pocket, considering that they beat the Ravens earlier in that 2024 year. And then, of course, the Ravens went by them standing still, and they lost the division, and they ended up being a 6 seed before getting blown out by the Ravens in Baltimore in the wild card round. So I understand that too. Trust me, don't think I've thought about this, people. I mean, I've watched it unfold. I know what's happening. But as early as the season may be, and we're going to get to just about the third way point of the year, you have to like, and the game's going to get tougher once you get to the second half, but you have to like where you are if you're a Steeler fan. I get it. You haven't really played anybody. I get it that you beat up on bad teams. When you beat the Jets, where they almost beat you on opening day, and you see where the Jets are at 0-6 and still hasn't registered a win, and they're the only team in the NFL that hasn't won a game yet. And when you beat the Browns, as they did last week, and I understand they have a good defense, and they got the 2 touchdowns second half, all right, fine. All right, they beat Minnesota, which shouldn't have been as close as it was. And Minnesota, we would look at as a decent team, probably the best team that they played up until this point, fine. And they beat New England, all right, you can look at that as probably the best team that they beat. And they forced 5 turnovers up in Foxborough. But that could have been a game that could have gone either way, considering, that both of the 2 of the 5 turnovers were inside the Steeler 5-yard line. Well, those could have been 2 touchdowns, and the Patriots would have won the game going away. So I understand all of that. But sometimes you got to look at the breaks and how they unfold. And right now it's starting to look as if, wait a minute, this is working in the Steelers' favor. That the football gods are shining down and say, hey, you're going to take this opportunity, meaning that if they win tonight and everything that I've depicted and put right in front of you, that this could be a big-time season? One more time, there is a ton of football to be played. I totally get it. But you got to start somewhere. And that game starts tonight. And if they win that game, who knows where this season may go. Now, we can't predict injuries. We can't predict things of that nature, which are just about impossible. And how games are going to play out, because we can look at the schedule and be like, oh, well, they still have the Browns. They got to go to Cleveland. They still got to play Cincinnati. They haven't played Baltimore yet, but Lamar's going to be back, and they're not going to play until the end of the year. I still got to go to Detroit. Chicago's not going to be a picnic. Green Bay's going to come to Pittsburgh. That's going to be hotly contested, and that's going to be Aaron Rodgers' first time going against his former team. So it's not as if the schedule is going to lighten up, but it's still right in front of them. And hopefully they can remain healthy and see where it goes, because, again, 10 years between playoff wins is a long time, especially if you're a Steeler, knowing that the standard is winning the Lombardi Trophy, not just clinching a playoff spot and hoping to get a wild card win and then losing in the divisional round. Sadly, you kind of are looking forward to that this go around if you're a Steeler fan, but you know what? You got to start somewhere, and hopefully that start is tonight, where they can really put a stranglehold on the division before we even get to the halfway point of the year. And like I mentioned, the league is wide open right now. I understand the Chiefs are like the boogeyman because they're 3-3, and they got number 15 at quarterback, and you can't count them out, can't bet against them, etc. We know Buffalo, they lost their Monday night. Their defense is Swiss cheese. I think Bijan Robinson scored another touchdown. So Buffalo, I understand Josh Allen is Superman, but he can't do it all. So you have that scenario in Buffalo, and the Steelers do play Buffalo later this year in Pittsburgh. So that's going to be a big-time game, especially when you talk about potential seeding when it comes to playoff positioning. But for even the Eagles, losing 2 in a row the way they have, Denver and the Giants there last Thursday, and give it up for Tampa. They've had a great start. They're going to play Detroit on a Monday night, which is going to be a big game. Detroit, who suffered a loss there the other day, as we saw, against Kansas City on Sunday night, and Brian Branch, who was handed down a 1-game suspension, is going to appeal. Who knows what the status of is as of right this moment. I could check that to see where we're at. But I haven't heard or seen anything. Let me see as I pull that up. Oh, look at that. Some baseball news. Maybe I'll get to that toward the end. Nothing as of right this very moment when it comes to that scenario. Hold on a second. Let me put this back here. So when you take a look at what's happening, even with the Lions, even if they do miss Branch for 1 game, big whoop, but they should be fine. And the Buccaneers, they have a very easy schedule. Who knows? They could end up having the 1 seed when it's all said and done. But do you trust Todd Bowles in a big spot? That's going to be the big question mark moving forward with him, especially when the games get bigger and the lights get brighter. I was going to say the brights get lighter. Well, you know what I mean. So it's a scenario where right now it is unpredictable. It's not like baseball where the Dodgers are going to get there. It's not like the NBA where the team that has the best record, OKC, well, they're going to get there. No, NFL is different. You could have a team that could go 15-1 like the Packers did in 2011 and the Giants went in there and upset them. Or even the Tennessee Titans, and I understand they're the Titans, but when the Bengals went in there as the Titans were a 1 seed and the Bengals upset them, you saw what happened. So NFL, very unpredictable, and I'm sure this is what they want, and this is what's great. I have to say, this is what's great about the NFL, because everybody's involved, even the small markets. So it's not just New York, it's not Dallas, it's not LA, it's not Chicago, it's not Philadelphia. It is Indianapolis, it is Jacksonville, it is Tampa Bay. It is, some of those teams that wouldn't be on anybody's radar, but because the way the NFL operates and the way it's structured, any team on any given year could have a big year. So we'll have to wait and see how it's all going to shake down here as we get toward the halfway point. And I'm sure once we get past the 9th game, we'll get that 30,000-foot view and take a peek as to where we stand at that time. Because as we all know, a lot could change. Next thing you know, Steelers will be 5-4 and they're middling in the pack. And Indianapolis could come crashing. And the next thing you know, the Chiefs will have the best record. And it's as if nothing ever happened. So as far as the games this weekend, as we take a peek here, you know what's happening tonight. You have the Rams in Jacksonville. That is a game in London, so 9:30. You know that's going to continue, I believe, until the early part of November. So for those who are going to wake up early, to my guy out in the left coast, Bio, a.k.a. Bruce, or really Bruce, a.k.a. Bio Zio, my guy there, who always hops on the YouTube channel with the podcast and the live streams. I got to give him a shout out. So you got to be up at 6:30 to watch that game. But then you have New Orleans at Chicago, Miami at Cleveland, New England at Tennessee. That's Mike Vrabel's return to Nashville. Vegas at KC. Philly at Minnesota. That's a good game. Who knows with J.J. McCarthy if he's going to start. That may be a game-time decision, so we'll wait to see there. Carolina, who's playing well at 3-2. Do the Jets finally somehow, some way muster up enough to upend the Carolina Panthers? Giants in Denver. Not a bad game considering what the Giants did, and they had that mini bye with Philly. Indianapolis goes back to LA because remember they played the Rams a couple of weeks ago, but now they have a scenario where they're going to play the Chargers. You have Washington at Dallas. You have Green Bay at Arizona, and then the nightcap, Atlanta at San Francisco. Atlanta's big win against Buffalo, at least that adds a little something to it, and we'll see what Michael Penix does. And we know San Francisco, they are a mass unit. Guys dropping like flies, so that is your Monday night or Sunday night deal. And your Monday night, guess what, people? Another double header. Tampa, Detroit is the first game at 7 on ABC, so that's going to be a Buck and Aikman game because the nightcap is going to be at 10, Houston at Seattle. And your buys are Buffalo and Baltimore this week. So that is your schedule. NFL, as we take a look at week 7. And as far as week 8 in college football, we're almost at the halfway point. Pretty much, a lot of teams will play 12, 13 games, depending. But I'm going to take this time out now. And maybe probably could have done it next Thursday, but I want to take it now only because, as I mentioned at the top, we're 6 weeks away from Thanksgiving, and we know that's a big weekend of college football, which pretty much will encapsulate in the end of the regular season, and then you'll have the conference championships after that. But right now, when you look at what has transpired, to me, the selection committee, they are going to be in a tizzy to try to figure out who is going to be part of the top 12 in college football. Now, we understand anything can happen. Things could change, drop of a dime. So I'm not going to really forecast who I think is going to make it when it's all said and done because it's a waste of time. Because any one of these teams get picked off. And when you have a ton of the teams that are in the top 15, that are in the SEC, and you know they're going to cannibalize one another, that's where a team that may have 0 losses or 1 loss in particular, if they end up having 3, although they still may be able to sneak in there based on the strength of schedule, but you don't know what the committee is going to pick. And they actually may pick an SEC team over a team from the Big 10 or Big 12. But as we saw last year, they took Indiana before they took Alabama. Because remember, Alabama had 3 losses, but Indiana was the one team that got in there to be the 12 seed to go up against Notre Dame, and we know what happened in that first playoff game between those teams. So we would think that the teams that are going to be locks, Ohio State, Miami, Indiana. Now, Indiana's going to have a cakewalk because they don't play Ohio State this year like they did last year. Penn State, who knows? They may look at that as their semifinal or championship game. And Indiana, as I mentioned on Monday's podcast, got to give it up. They did a tremendous job beating Oregon the way they did. But you would think those 3 teams, you think Texas A&M, although that could be tricky depending on their schedule the rest of the way and who they're going to have to play. Because like I mentioned, a lot of those SEC teams haven't played one another. Ole Miss, there's another one at 6-0. Alabama, 5-1. Then you have Texas Tech, Oregon. I think after you get to Alabama, and even Texas Tech for that matter, Oregon, could they lose another game? We'd have to look at their schedule. Georgia, you would think they'll find a way even at 2 losses. LSU, lot could happen with them. Tennessee, they could also be a wild card. Not a wild card spot, but a wild card, whether they could get in or could be out. Georgia Tech, that could be the one team that could get in there currently at 6-0, but they play in a weak conference, as you know. Then you have Notre Dame. I understand they have 2 losses, and they're going to play a big game against USC in their building on Saturday, which is going to be enormous for both teams. USC right now is ranked 20th in the nation, and you have Notre Dame right there at 13. Yes, they're right behind Georgia Tech. So that is a fascinating game there come Saturday night. I believe it's on NBC. And when you look at BYU, who's undefeated right now, Missouri, who lost to Alabama the other day, and I didn't really talk about that game. I know Missouri actually had a shot to tie the game or even take the lead, but they had that late pick there that sealed it. But Missouri, 5-1, even Vandy, and I understand Vandy, think about it. Vandy and Missouri both lost to Alabama. So no slouch there. But I would think that a lot of the teams, as I mentioned at the very top, those top 6 right now, I think, are bulletproof. Ohio State, Miami, Indiana, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Alabama. The others are wild cards. And even though we would think Georgia and Oregon, I mean, listen, Oregon had that loss to Indiana, so they're going to look at that as a strength of schedule situation. Even though Indiana, they played nobody. I mean, let's face it. I understand they're going to look at that Illinois game, that 63-10 game. But Illinois, despite them being in the top 25, they're out of it now, but have been in it for pretty much the majority of the season. But still, I don't think that's going to hurt Oregon in the grand scheme of things, especially if they run the table from here to the end of November. And, of course, whom they play in the conference championship is going to be enormous as well. But we would think both of those teams will probably make it if they both have one loss, whomever that's going to be, whether you do have Oregon and Ohio State. Chances are that could be the situation because obviously you don't have East and West anymore. So right now, college football, it is going to be fascinating to watch and to see it all unfold. And a lot of those teams from 7 on down to 15, you know, Oklahoma you got to throw in there as well. Obviously, they had that big win against Texas, and I understand. Oh, excuse me, that's a lie. I take that back. They got spanked by Texas, which I know is going to hurt them because it's not as if Texas is ranked. But it's a situation where Oklahoma, you can't discount them based on their reputation, and who knows if you have somebody from the selection committee says, no, we have to have Oklahoma there instead of maybe a team from the SEC, whether it's an Ole Miss that drops or even LSU to a certain extent, maybe they'll squeeze in Oklahoma in there. And of course, you got to remember, how could I forget, Oklahoma is part of the SEC now, so it's not a situation where Oklahoma is from the other conference. So now that you have that, I understand you're going to say, well, JAYREELZ, what was that all for? You got to give me something, like which teams do you see are going to make it? It's hard to predict. You may have a team that could get 3 losses this year and get in. And listen, if I could tell you, breaking down all these schedules to think that, oh, well, this team that's going to have 3 losses, I think they're going to get in. We don't know that. But what I do know is that it is going to be frenetic. It is going to be a frenzy. It is going to be utterly fantastic. Because this is what college football has now become. Once upon a time, you didn't have this system. There was no playoff. Then you had the 4-team playoff as early as 2 years ago. And yeah, you accepted it, but you're like, oh, we got to wait for the expansion. We got to see them go to 12 teams, and let's see what that's like. Well, we got a taste of it last year, and this year it's even going to be more crazier, I think. Because you have a lot of good teams that are there. You have a lot of good teams that are going to be in the mix, especially from that 6 to 15 window. And on any given week, let's just say, for instance, USC wins. Notre Dame will have 3 losses, and they can run the table, and they still somehow, some way may be able to get in. But will they get in over USC if they are able to run the table from here on out, considering that USC is right now 5-1? That's where the argument lies. And people are going to say, well, wait a minute, USC beat Notre Dame. So why does Notre Dame all of a sudden get a bid, or why would the selection committee pick them? Stranger things have happened. They didn't pick Alabama last year, and I get it, 3 losses, but they are Notre Dame. So even if USC does make it and Notre Dame somehow sneaks in through the back door, people may be up in arms over that. But that's why it's hard to predict, and that's why I can't even figure out. Now, when we get to the last 2-3 weeks of the season, that final quarter, I'll have a better feel. I'll have a better understanding because I'll say, oh no, these teams, this is what's happening, whether their schedule is easy or whether it's somewhat difficult or even massively difficult. I'll have a better grasp and take the temperature of that to see that, all right, well, I think if I'm part of the selection committee, you got to have this team go in, or you need to have that team go in, or you know what, that team doesn't deserve to go in, or you know what, it's going to be close, but I wouldn't pick them. But this is why I bring this up now, to set the table a month from now to where we could go over it and see where we lie at that point. And I think it's going to be fascinating. I mean, anything short of fascinating. Or nothing but short of fascinating. Let me get my words together here. That's how excited I am over this college football playoff and how this is all going to shake down. Now, as far as the schedule this week, you have LSU at Vanderbilt, which is a big game. Obviously, one of those teams are going to have a loss and could certainly hurt their bid for a college football playoff. Now, we know that LSU lost to Ole Miss a couple weeks ago, and this will be a second loss for them. Same for Vandy. As I mentioned, they lost to Alabama. So that is an enormous game at high noon on ABC. Then you have Georgia Tech at Duke. I only bring that up because, do I smell an upset there? I'll just leave that right there. Michigan, after their loss to USC the other day, they'll host Washington in a very poor man's version of their championship game 2 years ago. Then your 3:30 window, Ohio State and Wisconsin, Michigan State, Indiana, Ole Miss at Georgia. That is an enormous game right there because Georgia, as you know, they have the one loss against Alabama, and the Running Rebels have not lost yet. So with that game being in Athens, that is a big game. I mean, Ole Miss will really make a statement if they win that game. So that one is a big time affair there, 3:30. That's also on ABC. And then the nightcaps, for those locally, you want to see Oregon, they play at Rutgers. And your 7:30 game, Tennessee at Alabama. Need I say more? USC, Notre Dame. Too bad they go up against one another. That was like the game a few weeks ago. Oregon, Penn State, and Georgia, Alabama. They played at the same time. Now you have Tennessee, Alabama, and USC, Notre Dame going at it there. And then later on that night, Missouri at Auburn, which that should be a big game. I know I didn't talk about the Georgia-Auburn game the other day where I know they had that touchdown called back. It would have been 17-0 and they ended up losing that game. But Auburn, you would think they're going to want to chomp at the bit to see what they could do to get at Missouri, considering they lost Alabama. And then you have Utah at BYU. That's huge for BYU if they want to remain in the mix there at the bottom rung of that 6 through 15 bracket, or window, I should say. So you have a ton of great games in college football. Can't wait to watch, follow, recap, etc. on the pod next Monday, or this coming Monday, I should say. And obviously, stay dialed into the channel at JAYREELZ. Please go there if you haven't done so. Subscribe, like, leave comments, etc. As you'll get shorts from me throughout the course of the weekend. I like to put up a minute or 2 minute shorts on what's happening in sports on any given day, every day, all day. So definitely check that out. But that is your college football. And as I turn my attention to the ice, as I lace up the skates, a couple of things I want to talk about the National Hockey League. Now, we know we're 10 games in, or 10 days in, so not a lot you can really get into. I know the Sabres finally won a game and finally had a lead in the game, considering they started off 0-3. They beat Ottawa yesterday, where they scored the first goal of the game on a power play where it hit off the back of the glass and in the back of the goalie and into the net, which was one of the weirdest goals that I've ever seen. That was shot by Jack Quinn, the defenseman. But the Sabres get off the schneid as they get their first win, and we're still waiting for, I believe, San Jose and even the Islanders, for that matter, who host Edmonton tonight. There at UBS, as I mentioned earlier in the week, Connor McDavid, if you want to get a chance to see him, now's your shot. They beat the Rangers there on Tuesday night, Islanders tonight, and they play in New Jersey against the Devils on Saturday afternoon. But for the Rangers, I want to touch on them for a second. The Rangers now have played 6 games, or maybe 5 games. Let me double check that. I know they've had 3 games at home. That is a lock. And in the 3 games in their building, the friendly confines, Madison Square Garden, yes, they are 2-3. They've lost all 3 games in their building, where the two games that they've won have been on the road at Buffalo and at Pittsburgh. And now they actually go on the road again. They're in Toronto tonight and in Montreal Saturday before coming home Monday against the Minnesota Wild. But here's the thing. They have played 180 minutes in their building, and how many goals do you think they put up? Put it this way. As you all know, I don't play in the National Hockey League. I've never played in the National Hockey League, and I will never play in the National Hockey League. But you know what? If I did, the Rangers that is, have scored as many goals at home that I have, or if I was in the NHL or had just one shift, I'd have the same amount of goals that the Rangers have had in their home building in their first 3 games. And that's 0. I mean, think about that. They have not scored 1 goal in their building. They've been shut out by Pittsburgh in the home opener, Washington on Sunday, and the aforementioned game against Edmonton Tuesday, to where they now are 7 minutes and change, I think 7:19 away from breaking the NHL record, which was set almost 100 years ago by a team named the Pittsburgh Pirates. No, I'm not talking about the baseball team either. Or even before they were the Pittsburgh Steelers, they were the Pittsburgh Pirates, dating back to 1933. But for the Rangers to be literally 8 minutes away from breaking a record. Now, it's a trivial, almost, I don't want to say senseless, but that does say something for your team at home not being able to score a goal. All right, you get shut out game 1. Okay, fine. Oh, you got shut out again? Twice? All right. Strange, but all right, back-to-back shutouts to open up your home schedule. But now 3 straight games? I mean, that is unheard of. So we're going to have to wait till Monday night when they play in Minnesota. Watch them go to Toronto, win 6-1, and then Montreal 8-2, and they come back home and they can't score a goal to save their lives. I mean, that's how sports work sometimes. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we're going to have to wait till next week, or at least maybe next Tuesday, on the channel in order for you to get my take on whether or not they break the record. Watch the Rangers score a goal 5 seconds in, and then that ices that. But the NHL on the whole, that is pretty much what you have. I'm not going to get into records or anything like that, but the teams that haven't won games yet, San Jose and the Islanders, those are the only 2 teams that have not won a game so far. And your undefeated teams, and I'm talking about clean undefeated, not the Vegas Golden Knights who are 2-0-2. And I get it that they have not lost in regulation this year, but I want clean wins. I want teams that are like 3-0-0, as I see here. The Carolina Hurricanes off to a great start considering all the offseason moves that they made. But yes, you do have teams that are 3-0-1 or 2-0-1 or 2-0-2. All right, that's fine. That's cute. But I want undefeated, 6 points. That's it. Not you gain a point here and there because of overtime losses. And as far as the NHL with some injuries, I know Jacob Markstrom, the goalie for the Devils, are going to be out for a couple of weeks with a lower body injury. And also Brady Tkachuk, who, as we all know, his brother Matt is going to be out till middle part of December, coming off of that hernia surgery. And they also have the Panthers, who now have another defenseman, Dmitry Kulikov. He's going to be out for 5 months because I believe he had labrum surgery. I don't know if it was in his left or right shoulder, but he's going to be on the shelf for some time. So the Panthers, who have played well here, and they got their first loss in regulation the other day, losing to, or as a matter of fact, I think it was last night, to the Red Wings. Or maybe that was 2 nights ago. So you have that to look at if you're a Panther fan, but for Tkachuk out for a month with a hand injury in Ottawa, and that's a big loss, as you know. So that's the latest there in the NHL with injuries and things of that nature. And as far as the schedule, real quick, let's take a peek to see if there's anything interesting on the docket. We talked about Rangers in Toronto, Edmonton at New York. Florida playing the Devils tonight. So the Florida Panthers come to town. They're the 2-time reigning Cup champs. Winnipeg and Philly. Vancouver at Dallas, Boston at Vegas, Pittsburgh at LA to play the Kings. Tomorrow, Tampa, Detroit, Minnesota, Washington. Not much there. Saturday, Edmonton, Jersey, you know, Seattle, Toronto, New York, Montreal, Minnesota at Philly as they're making their way here east, considering that they're Washington Friday, Philadelphia Saturday, and they play the Rangers at the Garden on Monday, so I wonder if they're going to play the Islanders or Devils during that trip. Let's just take a peek. Yeah, they play the Devils there on Wednesday, so now I'm going ahead of myself. But Saturday, Minnesota, Philly, Tampa, Columbus, Boston at Colorado. You got some good games here forthcoming. Carolina at LA to play the Kings. Sunday, Vancouver at Washington, Edmonton at Detroit. Afternoon game. This is on the heels of the game against New Jersey. Boston at Utah. So, yeah, you got some good games if you're a hockey fan you want to dial into and check out. Definitely, at least you have that to chew on heading into this coming weekend. And then lastly, the NBA, hardwood, real quick. Nothing really to unpack unless you want to talk about Russell Westbrook signing with the Sacramento Kings. And I talked about on Monday how Keegan Murray's going to be out with that UCL tear in his thumb. And actually, they gave him an extension, 5 years, $140 million. So he gets the bag. Good for him. But with Westbrook coming into the mix to where, and I understand he's bounced in a million teams over these years, whether it was in Washington, whether it was OKC even prior to that. Obviously, the Lakers, Clippers, I mean, you name it, Nuggets just last year. So he certainly has bounced around. But he signs with the Kings. I'm sure he's going to give them whatever energy he has left in the tank. We all know, what is he, 35, 36 years of age. He still brings it. I understand Russell Westbrook is a wild card in the case where when you expect him to play well, he doesn't. And when you don't think you're going to get that lift off the bench or for him to play well, he actually does do that. So that's what you have there with the NBA, and Jason Kidd signed to a multi-year extension in Dallas. No shock there. There's actually talk about maybe putting Cooper Flagg at point since Kyrie's not going to come back, and I think that's been dismissed. So, yeah, as he says, non-committal about keeping Flagg at point guard. I don't know if I do that. That's putting too much on the rookie. I'm sure he'd be able to do it, and obviously we saw him do that in college a little bit there at Duke. But, right, they want to slowly, gradually bring him in. And maybe at some point in the year, he'll play a little point guard before Kyrie comes back. You would think sometime after the All-Star break, if his rehab and physical therapy goes well. So NBA tips off Tuesday with the doubleheader. I'll have an NBA preview next week. I'll do my over-unders. In fact, I'll have over-unders on Monday's podcast. I'll just go through them, but I won't pick which ones. But I will have an NBA preview for you guys and gals there on Tuesday, but it'll be on YouTube. It won't be on Apple or Spotify. If you want to get the full angle, full view of the NBA from soup to nuts, it'll be on my YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, as I've said a million times over. So definitely subscribe. Keep yourself locked in to the channel, as I have plenty of content coming down the pike, including some sports history content, which is going to be put forth tomorrow, as well as maybe even on Sunday. So I got a few things lined up. Definitely want to keep yourself tapped into that, because with the month of October in baseball, and a lot of the sports history is going to revolve around things that have happened in the past, big-time games, big-time memories, big-time moments, controversy, etc. One more time, people, this is your one-stop shopping for not only sports on the current level, but also from the past, present, even future for that matter. Also some lifestyle content, which I'm also producing behind the scenes for the channel. So please, the little engine that this podcast is, I want to continue to increase it, get to 1,000 subscribers. Right now I'm at 725, so the little engine that is keep on going on that track. Even if it's local, hopefully one day it'll be express, and I'll really be off and running. But to your support, and thank you for your support, for those who have participated, contributed, etc. And if you haven't, please take a screenshot, send it to your family, friends, foes, frenemies. Get them involved on any of my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or just JAYREELZ on Instagram. The Twitter, I was going to say Facebook, but Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number in the old-fashioned way. The JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to also, any questions, comments, suggestions that you may have, I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because that will do it. That's the end of this podcast and end of another one as we close the book here and get ready for the weekend. So, as always, thank you so much for participating, for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is that I have to say about the toy department of life called sports. And one more time, if you haven't done so, you can also subscribe on Apple, Spotify. The website is jayreels.com. You know about the YouTube channel, because whether you do or do not know, there's what I love to do, people. Full time. Trying to blaze a path, carve space in the podcast universe, as well as the YouTube universe. I understand there are a million creators out there, and I'm sure there are many people that you get your sports information, that you turn to, that is trusty, rusty, etc. Hopefully, and quite frankly, I would want to be one of those people, because as long as I'm sitting in front of this microphone and camera, you're not going to get any clickbait, you're not going to get rage bait, you're not going to get over the top, you're not going to get yelling, you're not going to get screaming, you're not going to get any gimmicks, any artificial ingredients, you're going to get none of that. Because I promise you, what you are going to get is nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.